By midday, I'd already been knocked off my bike once, and I was desperate to find my own space to ground myself.
When a teenager, Jude Kriwald cycled across 2 continents, ending up in India. Then he returned to a regular, normal life, job, partner, home, for 10 years. But it wasn't enough.
So I started in Dakar in Senegal and came down the coast, and you can't really see it, but this here is Gambia. So I came along here, it was all just, I'll go along and I know I roughly can get from here to here, and I like doing it sort of a week ahead. I will sort of search and think, what are the roads like, have a look on Google Earth, and then just give it a go. I dropped out of school at 16 and I thought I was going to go travelling straight away. That's why I dropped out. And then my mum instantly said, you can't go travelling till you're 18, tough luck. Start paying rent, get a job. With love. And so I did that and I saved up. And when I was 18, all my friends went on a gap year and I joined them even though there was no gap as such. And of many things, one formative experience was going to Kashmir in India, and it was still springtime, winter, so you couldn't drive up. The road from Manali was shut. Flew up and we hired a jeep with some other travellers I met, and we went over Kardungla Pass, or Kardungla, La is Pass, and we got stuck in a snowstorm, and there were trucks and jeeps falling off the road, and they say it's the highest motorway road in the world. It's actually not quite true, but they say that for tourists' sake. And long story short, I had a mountain bike on the roof and we were all stuck, and I just thought, I'd like to cycle down. So I cycled down from 5,500 metres down to Leh at 3,500 metres on this gravel track. And I didn't know that wind blindness is a thing. And by the time I got to the bottom, I thought it's so cloudy. It's because the wind has been absolutely pelting me, and I was wearing thin sort of hippie goer trousers and just one woolly jumper. And I just thought, this is exhilarating. I'm on my bike and I've sort of solved the problem for myself. And I'm having a great time. And I was just struck by the beauty of those mountains. And Kashmir is behind, the mountains up there behind a snow or rain shadow where the Himalayas don't let the monsoon clouds come over. So you've got these stark mountains like in Pakistan, but with no snow. And I thought, that's stunning. Where else is like that in the world? And I found about the Pamirs in Tajikistan. And I thought, I want to cycle around the Pamirs next year. And I thought, cool, well, how will I get there? And I just thought, well, if I'm going to cycle around them, I'll just cycle there. And then I thought, it doesn't seem like a big enough destination to finish, or maybe the flights
Okay.
maybe it's the flights are too expensive. I genuinely don't remember why I thought, don't finish there, finish in India. And I decided to cycle to India from Somerset, which I thought would take 6 months, because I saw some people had done it in 4, and I thought, well, I'll slow down a bit. I did it in 13. I really enjoyed myself along the way.
13 months?
13 months.
Right.
Yeah, and
Got sick along the way?
I came home with typhoid and giardia. So I was meant to cycle home from Heathrow to Bath, as my parents were at the time, and I stopped over in Q8 and I just called my dad and I said, something's really wrong, you have to pick me up. And I ended up getting quarantined before it was trendy in Bath Hospital they thought it was malaria because I had that the year before on my backpacking in India, and it turned out it was typhoid and giardia, and I really blew my gut out for a year. It was not fun. So yeah, going on to Africa, I took a much bigger medical kit this time because I didn't have that same blasé approach of, it'll all be fine, I'll just drink all the water and, whatever, I'm young and I'll adapt.
What did you, what I was going to say, what did you get out of that big 2-month trip apart from giardia and typhoid? What, for you, for your personal development, what do you think you came back with?
On the cycle from the cycle to India? I was thinking about this, it's tempting to say, it's sort of a self-belief and realising that, like many people, and most people I'd say I'm quite capable. But I don't think I would have gone in the first place if I didn't already have that. Some sense of that.
It could have been naivety, though. It could have been a young naivety that led you, and then you learned, actually, I can cope.
Yes, yeah. What I did definitely come back with was this feeling of, I want to spend my life adventuring. Mm-hmm. It was only years later that I sort of realised I also want to help other people adventure. I don't want to just do it for my own sake. But yeah, it was a real feeling of, this is where my passion lies. and this makes me feel good. And I struggle to fit in sometimes socially, whereas when I'm out there in the wild, there are no rules other than nature. Pretty much. Obviously, I don't become a thief and start stealing from farms, but I mean, generally, in terms of all those things I said, finding water, you've got to find a shop and pay for some food. But in terms of how you choose your day, where you start, what route you take, no one's going to tell you how to do it, and you have to figure it out for yourself.
Is that why you go alone?
Yeah, I think so. I really I do enjoy traveling with people, but you gain some things and you also lose some things. And one of the things you lose is that ability just to go into that flow mode, I said, where you're not even necessarily consciously thinking through the decisions always. Sometimes you need to. And then you get somewhere and you're like, oh, I did that. I got myself here. Doesn't mean you're special or anything, but it does make you realize you're capable. I think what I came away with was this huge urge to spend my life outdoors and adventuring and exploring.
In time, that urge would take Jude to West Africa and the ride he filmed, but there was a 10-year gap after the first adventure.
I came back, and to be fair to myself, I got a job working on, there's a company, Tour d'Afrique. They take people on quite expensive cycle tours across the continent where you just cycle and they do all the logistics for you. And we did Shanghai to Istanbul, and I was working on that. And I thought, great, I've got a job in the outdoors. I got paid absolute peanuts, $500 for 4.5 months. I thought, this is great, I've got a job here. I didn't really click with the crew and didn't get offered another job. And then I thought, okay, I'll start my own cycle expedition business. And whilst I was saving money to do that, I started working for a tiny, tiny, tiny company as a cycle courier called Deliveroo. And I went into the Deliveroo office to interview, because I had to interview to be a cyclist back then. And I had a jersey that I'd picked up on my cycle, and it said Iran. And the guy interviewing me said, how come you've got that? And he'd studied Farsi. Anyway, we got chatting. It turned out he'd followed my blog as I cycled to India. So we stayed in touch as I became a cyclist. And then after 2 months, he said, look, Jude, we're really busy in the office. I've been asked to hire an ops associate, operations associate. Do you want to do it? And I did. And long story short, I joined and I was given one customer service agent and me. And I was told, set up the team to manage all the communications to the riders, scheduling, getting them in through the door, checking that they're doing everything okay, supporting them. I had one person in my team. I thought, that's manageable, I can do that. And 3 years later, I had 200 people in my department and I'd just grown. And the company had gone boom from one city in London to 12 countries. And it was exhilarating. So I was happy.
So you're completely engrossed in this, because that's
Totally
clearly an absolutely fantastic challenge to have to take on.
It was amazing for me. And because I didn't go to university, it was really good for me to have some sort of professional growth.
Yeah.
It helped on my CV, because I don't have a university on my CV. And I learnt so much.
So when did that itch come back?
It was there pretty much throughout. I remember lying awake at night, and I say this in my film, thinking, why aren't I out there adventuring? And so I managed to do 3 years. And then we got so big, it just felt like a totally different company. They were still doing great stuff, but they were getting all these MBA people in, and all the people who'd been there from the start were starting to get disgruntled. Like, don't they know how hard we've worked? And yeah, so me and my girlfriend at the time, we decided to go traveling to Central America. And honestly, from then on, I don't know why I didn't pick up the adventuring bit beforehand. But it was definitely through conversations with my partner, Nicola, again, as I talk about briefly in the film, that I just sort of thought, this is, I've just got to make a go of it. I was still lying awake at night thinking, why aren't I out there doing it?
I have to say, she seems a very understanding partner. I mean, we've only just met at the door, but in the film, it was like, crikey, for someone to say to you, just go off for 3 months. Yeah. I think there's not many partners would say that, knowing that you won't completely scratch that itch.
No, I consider myself extremely fortunate. But what I would say is that, there's a cost. And we sort of talked about it beforehand, and we thought, yeah, 3 months, that feels doable. That's our limit, maybe. And we've come back, and now we're like, well, maybe 2 months actually is our limit.
Yeah.
And that's, for me, I think that's great. I can go off and do my thing, and she can get on with her life. But if you're used to living with someone and then they're away, that's quite a big change.
There's a big space where you would normally be.
Yeah. Yeah, so we talk about it, and I don't consider it a sort of free pass. Go and do all the adventures you want always. It's like any sort of partnership, which is how I view how we view our relationship. You have to consider the benefits and the costs to both of you, and yeah, we both try and be. We have most people would say who know us well that on the scale of things we have quite an independent relationship, but that doesn't mean we don't want each other around a lot. But it just means we know that to be happy, we say go and do the thing you want to do. And that works for us.
I was 2 months into my 3-month cycle alone from Senegal to Liberia.
Hello.
Whilst I'd enjoyed elements of being on the road once more, something was missing. I found myself irresistibly drawn to the wilderness. I stocked up. I've got 6 baguettes, 50 biscuits. I could see a dirt track that weaved right through the centre of the rainforest, except for a short section where the track disappeared. I decided that I would take the dirt track as far as I could and attempt to bridge that gap in the road. But I soon learned the way forward would not be as simple as I'd hoped.
Jude's film of part of his West African journey is winning awards at festivals, and the trailer is on YouTube. It is very good, having hired a professional editor to put it all together.
Yeah, this green line around here, that's like called Gola or Foya, and the road is so small that when it existed you can't just see it. So Vahun is where I left from, and then Jawaje. You can see there's a track from Jawaje downwards, but there's no track above Jawaje, and that's the bit I crossed, and it's true there was no track, but there was also no track from the bit afterwards where I thought there would be a track, which is where the film got a bit more punchy, I guess. In those 10 years where I wasn't travelling, I'd become maybe a little bit, I don't know if jaded is the right word, but I felt like that young 19-year-old experience I had of travelling in the world being so exciting and waiting for sort of me personally, not on a big level, but personally to discover it for myself. It faded away. And if you could say any country to me that I hadn't been before, Russia, Brazil, Indonesia, and though I'd still think, that'd be kind of interesting, I'd have pictures in my head of what it's like and preconceptions of, the politics were like this, the economy is like this, because I didn't have that feeling when I was 19. These days you can just Google a place and see 20,000 photos, 500 bloggers who've been there and will tell you the top 10 places to go that aren't in Lonely Planet. And you think, God, like what's left to discover? Not that you have to be the first there, but you want to have an authentic experience. And for me, when I look at a world map of all the places you can go, West Africa is the place that I knew the least about. And, very few Western white tourists choose to go there. And I thought, I want to know two questions. One was sort of more personal, one was more social. I wanted to know what it's like to sleep alone deep in the jungle. And I wanted to meet West African locals, farmers, and know what are their lives like. I'm not going to do much more than scratching the surface with language barriers and massive differences in where we come from. But actually there's a bit that isn't in the film where, because I wasn't filming at the time, where quite far towards the end, I met someone, had a conversation, and he was just so excited to see me, and I was so excited to see him. And there was almost just love there, talking about, this is what I do, this is what you do. And I was like, how many acres do you have? What are you farming? Blah, blah, blah. And when we shook hands at the end and said goodbye and looked each other in the eye, I thought, that's it. This trip has been worth it. I've connected, really connected, and got a very, very, very small slice of what life is like for this person in West Africa.
Because they weren't all desperately positive, were they? Because, did you ever feel a bit, I don't know, because the way I've seen in the films, you're riding into a village, white man, the kids and what have you. You'd expect that to a certain extent of kids. But there is a certain dark moment in there that I don't want to give too much away. Yeah. But I just wonder whether you come across it, not because it's you, but because you're white, as affluent and very different, but not necessarily in a good way.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was quite complex, to be honest. The dynamics. I was expecting to go there and sort of almost be an apologist for all the things that the British had done in Gambia, Sierra Leone, which were British colonies.
Which you're riding through.
Which I was riding through. And first of all, I found the complete opposite, that the local villagers there have the white Westerners on an absolute pedestal, which was really shocking for me. The only times that they will be viewing white people typically is when at 3 p.m. on a Saturday, because on the same time zone as us, someone buys 2 litres of fuel, puts it in the generator, and they watch the Premier League.
It's good to say football.
Yeah.
Of course.
So I had people coming up to me who'd never met me and just saying, I'm a footballer, will you be my manager? Because they don't have the same level of globalization where we have vast access to the internet and knowledge and understanding of lots of different cultures. You can quickly understand other cultures. And so I found there was a big sort of disconnect between the reality of what my life was like and what they thought my life was like. They thought I could just be a football manager because I was passing through, for example.
Just give David Beckham a call.
Yeah. But more to your question about the more difficult bits, I often would cycle into a village and 1 or 2 kids would start chanting, white man, white man. And sometimes the entire village would join in. And initially I thought, fair enough, they've never seen a white person before. But although I totally understand it and I've never criticised them, it's very hard to deal with because it's a really good lesson for me. It made me think about women in this country. I've never really been objectified before, and I was being objectified. It's like they'd seen a flying pig. They're like, look at that funny thing we've never seen before. Let's point at it because it looks different. And I had to work really hard to occasionally snap people out of that. I'd go up to people and say, hi, do you want to chat? And they'd be like, oh, yes, you're a human. And then we'd have normal, rich, fulfilling conversations. But it was a lot of hard work, especially when you're cycling uphill on a dusty road. It's 35 degrees. You just want to ask someone for some water, but then everyone's pointing at you and shouting white man. It makes you not want to stop. But I don't want that. I do not want to make that sound like the overall experience of West Africans. It was just that on occasions I found it very hard to connect because there is such a big difference between us.
Between their lives and yours.
Between our lives, between affluence. It's very different. Even Central Asia, which many people have travelled to, it's quite a poor area. But there, it always felt like an exchange. People would be like, come into my house, I want to learn about you. And we'd exchange stories, blah, blah, blah. That just didn't really happen in West Africa. It was just too big a gap that you could still try and, be very human, treat people with massive respect. But there was such a big gap that all you could really relate on was smiling, being lovely to each other, sharing food.
But you have to be sensitive about that, don't you? About the food and the water.
Yes.
So because they're going to have limited supplies, and there's one part in the film where you actually leave a village because you're aware they don't have enough food for another mouth.
Yeah, it's a real consideration, and I found that difficult.
Did that happen a lot, or was it just in that place?
That was only in that place because that was a very isolated part of the jungle.
And how, if they're going to look after you, how can you? What payment can you give them?
Well, there was only one time where someone said to me, come into my house. And I thought, I've been really missing this sort of experience. I would love to do that. I would love to spend an hour or two with you and really get to know you. But I was a bit uncomfortable because it's a really deprived part of Gambia. And I went in and they showed me a massive plate of food they have. And something just didn't feel right. And I had a few spoonfuls and I said, thank you. And I did not fill myself up in any way. And then as I left, they asked for payment, which I had no problem with, but it just reminded me that this is not the same sort of just cultural exchange that I was used to traveling through Asia, for example. I never found the right way to do that. And in the end, I thought, I'm just always going to stock up on food. I'm absolutely not relying on local people. The one exception is using the wells. When I was going through Senegal and Gambia, which is sort of savannah or Sahel, just below the Sahara, it's very, very dry. There's no streams, so you have to use wells. And I'll totally admit my ignorance. The first time I found one, I used it to cool myself down. I poured some water on my head. And then I looked around and I thought, oh no, this place is such little water here. I just use this for drinking. I'll wash it when I get to a capital city and I find a guest house. You have to be switched on and you have to be culturally sensitive and you have to realise there'll be dynamics going on for other people that you might not immediately understand. And that's okay.
Talk about stuck in the mud. I tried to turn around because I wasn't getting any better. It's getting harder, in fact. I can't really get going now. My whole wheel system is caked in it.
I have the same bike that I cycled to India. It is made by Surly, a brand from the USA. It's all steel. It's a touring bike with 26-inch wheels, and you have 26-inch wheels because when you're in the middle of absolutely nowhere in a developing country, they are far more likely to have 26-inch wheels. You might occasionally find 700C. You will never ever find a 29-inch wheel in the middle of West Africa or Central Asia. And it's incredible having a steel bike because it's strong, and it means that if it snaps, you can weld it back.
Have you ever had to do that? People say this.
I've
You're the person who actually has
in-
welded a steel bike together.
Yeah, when I cycled to India, I snuck across Tibet, and it was a really remote part, so I stocked up with 30 days worth of noodles on my front rack. It was really heavy. And I was halfway across this 30-day crossing of Tibet, and the eyelets where the rack attaches the front fork snapped off. I tied it up with some rope, I rode 10 more kilometers to the next village, and the guy asked for about 50 cents, I think, and he welded it straight back on. And you can still see it on the bike, it's totally different color, but that is why you get a steel touring bike if you're going somewhere remote. Same reason that you use a stove that runs on petrol or diesel or kerosene or any flammable liquid, because you're never going to find nice little camping gas that you get, with your jet boil in Europe. It is. That'll be 17 kilos. Go from it. Don't lift it. It's so heavy that you shouldn't lift it from the saddle.
Oh, okay, right. Yeah. Yeah, you did. So you didn't actually go for the old carbon one then?
No, not the carbon one. This is all steel, and it's been so used that the badge on the front has been knocked off. It used to say long haul trucker here. It does still say one less car. Charlie the bike monger down in Dorset. That's where I got it from. And it's great. These are steel racks, also made by Surly. They're pretty rusty, but they work. I've probably gone through maybe 20 kickstands. A kickstand on a 50-kilo loaded bike just doesn't hold up very long. And this is the same MSR fuel stove that I cycled with to India. Some things you just keep and they don't change. So the frame will always be my frame. The racks, the fuel bottle, and the Brooks saddle. It's a bit cracked now, but it's still just so comfortable. And when I bought the bike, it comes with drop bars, which I'd never ridden before. And the first corner out of the bike shop, I crashed because I didn't get down to the brakes. So I cycled it all the way to Istanbul when I was 19. I got to a bike shop where I said, "You have to change this for me." And he gave me these nice. I love these. When you're going on sort of bumpy roads, you can really sort of shake it and get more leverage by being nice and wide. You don't want to be down here when you're off-road. These are super. And I've got my little wing mirror just for the West African traffic. It would have been on the other side in West Africa. Yeah, and that's pretty much it, really.
Are you using cycling shorts and stuff like that?
Are you cycling shorts? That's probably the extent of it. Yeah, I'm not a Lycra guy. I have the same 7-Eleven t-shirt which I picked up in Thailand when I was 18, wore that on the cycle to India, I wore it in West Africa, and I wear that because it's polyester, it doesn't break down, it wicks extremely fast, and it's it's the darker green than this, so you just get it dirty and you can't see it. But yeah, in terms of kit, I see other people who every time they go on a new trip, they have a fancy new bike, and I've got 3 gears on the front, 9 on the back, 27 gears. You don't buy bikes like that anymore. It's normally, 1 at the front and 11 at the back or something. And I just thought, it's not broken. Don't fix it. And I couldn't. When I shipped that bike back from India, I remember writing in Hindi, because I was in India, and Arabic, because it was going through Kuwait, and English, because it was landing in Heathrow. I wrote, "This bike is like my wife to me. Please look after it like you would look after your wife." And it got back in one piece.
This is way tougher than I thought it would be. I often wondered if I was still on the route of the old road or just lost, heading into the jungle abyss.
It's just taking me about 45-50 minutes to go about 200 meters.
Is this even the same way? Hello?
Disappeared with my handlebar bag with all my cash in.
Broken equipment, cut limbs, lack of water.
What am I doing?
A huge part of me wants to sit down and wait for a ride to get me out of here. But I know that I can't.
Did you ever start to go, "Oh, I might have bitten off more than I can chew here"?
There were 2 points where that occurred to me. One was, and I won't go into that too much because it is in the film, but I was robbed in the jungle. There were very, very, very few people around, but unfortunately one of the people It wasn't a violent thing, but yeah, that was a difficult situation. I had to think on my feet, and I did think, these people know where they are, these people know the way out, this person has a machete, what do I have on my side? And I just had to talk my way out of it. And that, it did occur to me, I thought, it might not end well. And the second one was, once I'd got through the bit that I knew to be the trackless part of the jungle and the road was meant to start, it turned out the road had been abandoned since the Civil War 20 years earlier. So you could still trace a vague path where there was a lack of old trees, but all the bridges had collapsed. The whole pathway was covered in big fallen trees. I was doing about 6-7 kilometers a day. And whenever there was a ravine with a collapsed bridge, most of the time I could work my way around it. But there's one, it's actually the photo which is used as the poster for the film, where these 2 logs have been laid across this ravine. And when I first saw it, I thought, this might be it, I might be turning around. But even turning around was difficult because I might not be able to find the way back.
So let's just build up the picture. You've got 2 logs and you are shuffling right foot, left foot, inching your way across. That's it. And there's a lot. You don't want to fall off, do you?
Yeah, so it's a ravine that's about maybe 20 feet wide, and it's been spanned. Someone has clearly walked there in the last couple of years. There's 2 logs about this wide, maybe sort of 6-7 inches wide each, a foot apart, shoulder widths apart. And I first thought, well, there's no way I could try and roll my bike. I'll stand on one, so I'm just standing on one log, leaning all my weight on the bike, because you need 3 points of contact. But if the bike slips off, I'm off. It's a 12-foot drop, and I could see logs with spikes coming out of them at the bottom of the ravine. And in the end, what I actually did was I very slowly etched my way out onto it without the bike, just to test it. And I was like, okay, these aren't actually rotten logs. These should hold up. And then I took all the panniers off the bike, and then the bike should be around 17 kilos, I guess, and I lifted it up onto my back. And what you actually don't see in the film is I got halfway across and I realised the bike was caught on a vine on the first side, so I'm swinging the bike, trying to disconnect it. It was a hairy moment, but I look back quite fondly on those moments and think, yes, it could have gone worse, but I felt like I believed in myself. There are a few moments in my life where I look back and I think that was actually reckless, and they were always unintentionally so, where I accidentally go way past my limits and think, oh, should not have done that. This was not one of them, thankfully.
Is that why you go to Africa? You feel the cold?
I'm actually the opposite. I was cursing myself in the jungle, thinking, Jude, you love the cold. Why have you come to the jungle?
As we headed for a park near Jude's home in Bristol, he told me how he's using his experience to help would-be adventurers.
Yeah, so I set up a website, an initiative, adventurementor.org, and it's basically my way of trying to give back. So anyone who's sort of typically underrepresented in the world of adventure, so women, people from lower income households, people of colour who want to go on adventure, big or small, I offer one-to-one online mentoring at no cost for free. And that's been incredibly rewarding and amazing to see the impact that can have on people. So for a lot of people it is confidence. Even though they have a good plan, it's a belief that they can do it themselves. So that's been amazing to help people with that. And for a lot of people it's literally just practical things. Like my favourite example is a lady who wanted to cycle back from Australia to England a year or two on her bike. And she just said to me, but how do you get fit enough to be able to cycle every day for a year? And I said, well, you don't. I'm not. You take rest days. You cycle 4, 5, 6 days and you have a rest and you enjoy your surroundings and you take it easy. And it blew her mind and set her off. She's like, in that case, I can go. I'm ready. I can take that. I can do a few days cycling and rest. So it's not that I have some particular, wisdom. It's just talking to someone who's done it before. And breaking down the mystery. We're not all hardcore adventurers.
It's
always
reassurance as well, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. And in a way, it's somewhat easier nowadays. There are more and more sort of WhatsApp groups you can get support from, and different internet resources. It's not just blogs and couch surfing anymore. But I'm really doing it because, selfishly, as much as anything, when I'm not on my own adventures, it's nice to be in the world of adventure and help other people go on theirs. And as I say in the film, that is what I want to do. I want to spend my life adventuring and helping others to do the same.
And then, of course, there are the skills needed to be a full-time adventurer.
If you want to try and make a living as an adventurer, you need to share your story. And you can film it, you can do the old school thing of writing about it, you can speak about it, People probably won't book you as a speaker if you haven't written about it or filmed it.
Because he won't know you.
Yes.
So basically all three, really.
Ideally, people do still get by on the writing and speaking front. For me, I wanted to film it. I always thought I wasn't a creative person, and then I realized a few years ago I am creative, but always only through a digital medium. Whether it's on Photoshop or building websites or making videos, that's where I really sort of thrive. In terms of how I taught myself, drone flying, just very amateur, just going to the park, trying out different things, and then a lot of YouTube. Before I went to West Africa, not so much for the drone, I just knew I wanted to make something. I thought it would just be a YouTube episode then, rather than a film. And I literally was searching how to film yourself, how to shoot B-roll, how to do lighting when you're on your own. All these things, totally basic amateur stuff. I'm an amateur filmmaker in my book. It helped quite a lot.
And when you got back, you had some more help.
Yes, and then when I came back, probably the best decision I made about that trip, very much influenced by my partner Nicola, was to find and work with an editor and pay for an editor. Because I knew that I'd captured good footage, or good enough. I knew there was a compelling story in there, but you'll see if you watch my YouTube episodes, which I think are pretty good for an amateur, but I'm an amateur. And if you want to be getting yourself out there, getting into film festivals, I want to use this film as a calling card to go to other companies in the future and say, look what I can do on my own. Imagine what we can do if we work together. So it needed to be good.
Because on your YouTube, you've got a couple of what were going to be episodes that you shot and edited along.
Yeah, well, I mean, they are up
trailer
there.
for the main film.
Yeah, they do tell the story, and yeah, the trailer is up there, but working with an editor was brilliant because he sort of sat me down and said, right, where's your script? And I thought, what do you mean a script? It's all happened already, and it's a documentary anyway. But thankfully, I'd been asked to give a speech just a couple of days before on courage. And I thought, I know what I'll do. I'll talk about, on the surface, going through the jungle, because some people might view that as courageous. But for me, the real courage, and I don't want to give too much away that's in the film, is the decision to actually go in the first place and to try and put those 10 years of not adventuring behind me and move into this phase of adventuring more. And I'd written a speech and I shared it with the editor, and he said, this is great, we can use this. And we started, trimming it down, moving bits around. And that's how it came about. And yeah, I'm very, very thankful. Christian Burnett, my editor, is incredible. He basically became a mentor for the film. He helped me rewrite some of the script. He helped me, do bits and bobs with voiceover, all sorts of things. He went way above and beyond. And we came out with a film, which I'll say to myself because he partly made it, really good. I think it's decent.
It's a really good film.
He's edited it really well, and we made it snappy. I've got so much footage. The GoPro was always recording. We could have made a feature film, but he was like, if it doesn't add to something, add to the story, take it out. And so it's 21 minutes. Most people have told me sort of, you're on the edge of your seat because we don't put. There's a little bit of B-roll here and there, but there's not too much time to sort of. I don't know. I was not, showing me eating breakfast every morning. It's not that sort of film.
And how are you going to use this film?
Well, I'm just trying to sort of get myself out there in the world of adventure. So I'm submitting it to film festivals. I showed it at the Royal Geographic Society at their big annual Explore Summit, which is a real treat.
Wow.
Showing it in front of, people who are really like-minded to me and hearing. It was amazing for me hearing how the mental health note in that film really struck a chord with a lot of my fellow adventurers. And as I said, I want to use it as a calling card, so I've got a fairly ambitious expedition idea for 2026. It involves cycling again, but this time in a very, very cold environment. And I want to use it to go to sponsors or maybe production companies and say, look, this is what I've done on my own. Imagine what we can do with a little bit of budget, a better camera. I had a Chinese smartphone that I was filming most of it on. Let's get some proper equipment and a little bit of budget, and we can make something special. I'm really interested in storytelling. It needs to be purposeful storytelling. I don't want to just film another white guy just having a great adventure, but aren't I tough? That is boring. But, I think there are parts of the film where someone might think, that was quite tough what you did, and I wouldn't say that's not true, but it's not about that. There needs to be a real message in the film. For me, this one I just made is about mental health. I think maybe a future one will touch on mental health or neurodivergence or maybe climate change and get people excited by a compelling story.
Has this helped you cope with re-entry? Having this sort of focus? Because so many people find it difficult when they come back, don't they?
Absolutely. I was talking with my friend and host of Seek Travel Worried, another podcast, Bella, and she was saying how she was talking to someone recently who was saying, the post-trip blues are such a big thing that not many adventurers talk about. And she was asking me what my experience of it was this time round. And I thought, actually, you know what? It was hard to adjust, but that's just more in terms of coming back and how you treat, being around other people and not just sleeping in a tent and not washing.
My wife found it really hard, when we came back from a big trip, to not just pee in the street, because when she walks in the street, but she will, she'll kill me for that. Yeah. Right, okay, you keep going and I'll just be quiet.
But it was amazing because I had the trip lived on, the energy was still there. But it was funny because it was behind closed doors, right? It was just me and my editor Christian, and Nicola would watch all the cuts that he was sending over, and we were going through it together. But I sort of stopped talking about that side of myself, the adventure, because it was all behind closed doors. And when it finally, after 5 or 6 months, I say finally, it was mostly on me that it took a long time. When it was finally ready to show, and we did a screening at the Outkit store in Bristol and then a couple in London, and I was like, I can finally share this part of me of the world that I've been working on for 6 months, because it's always been there, but just haven't been able to talk about it.
But you've processed it by now as well. It's still not too fresh in your mind. It's settled and the good stuff's risen to the top, as it were.
It absolutely has. And it helps you, as does doing conversations like this, helps you remember certain parts of the trip you'd forgotten. But then I also notice that because we've got the film and it's 21 minutes, there's a very clear narrative in it. It can skew your memory of what other bits also happened. So it's not that anything in the film is untrue, it's very clearly a documentary. But there are other bits that we didn't include, like there was actually someone towards the end of the jungle that I bumped into. And we couldn't include that in the film. There wasn't time, it wasn't relevant to the narrative. And I just think, oh yeah, I met that guy, that was a really nice experience. But because I've watched the film maybe 50 times in trying to edit it with Christian, that becomes my memory of what happened. And I forget all the other stuff. So I have to go back through my photos or my little logbook I keep and think, okay, this is also the reality, the more real reality as well.
Oh, we look out for the director's cut.
That would be really long.
Jude's film is called Alone Across Gola. I've linked to the trailer here and in the show notes, where you'll find a link to buy me a coffee, and that helps keep this show on the road. I'm Simon Willis. Thank you for watching and listening. Goodbye.